US President-elect Donald Trump has hit back at China after it lodged a protest over his phone conversation with the Taiwanese president. Donald Trump used Twitter to convey his anger, questioning whether China asked the US before it devalued its currency, making it hard for American companies to compete. He also raised China's decision to tax US imports and build a massive military complex in the South China Sea. The incoming vice president is playing down the controversy over the leader's phone call.
I think I would just say to our counterparts in China that this was a moment of courtesy. The president-elect talked to President Xi 2 weeks ago in the same manner. That was not a discussion about policy, and we're going to be preparing after January 20th to advance now what will be President-elect President Trump's agenda on the world stage, and we'll deal with policy at that time.
The phone call was the first by a US president-elect or president with a Taiwanese leader since the Carter administration switched diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China in 1979. Well, joining me for more on this is from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute is Canberra-INS Dr. Malcolm Davis. Dr. Malcolm Davis, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Firstly, your reaction to Donald Trump's latest tweets. Do you think they're a little bit out of order?
Well, I don't think so, in the sense that what he's doing is putting his bets on the table. He's a business negotiator, and so he's going to approach China in the form of a business negotiation, and he's making it clear that he's not going to be cowed or bullied by China in the South China Sea or in regards to Taiwan or in the Asia Pacific in general. So he's making it clear that he intends to take a robust stance against China. And in one sense, this is a good thing because it shows the Chinese that they can't assume that they can expand their grip on the South China Sea or threaten Taiwan without risking significant US response.
But who is he making it clear to whom? Do you think the Beijing is reading his tweets? Or, you know, when you're sending it out on Twitter, who are you really trying to engage? Or are you also trying to say, look, this is what my stance to the American people potentially, and saying I'm not going to be bullied by Beijing? Beijing, in fact, has had quite a muted response. This was in response to the telephone call, at least to the Taiwanese president. Beijing said it was just down to his inexperience. If it was that of an inflammatory nature, we could have expected a harsher response from Beijing, potentially?
Well, I think that Beijing is keen to not escalate this or get ahead of the game, shall we speak. He's president-elect. He's not yet president. Once he's sworn in on January 20th, then the dynamics change. And so any moves that President Trump would make in regards to South China Sea or Taiwan has more serious implications. But clearly Beijing will be wanting to play a careful game. They need good relations with the US as much as the US needs good relations with them. I don't see the US moving away from the one China policy. The phone call with Tsai Ing-wen doesn't necessarily imply that. But I do see the Trump administration taking a more robust and stronger position in regards to China than the Obama administration did. So they're more likely to stand up to China in the South China Sea or in regards to the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands in the East China Sea or in regards to Taiwan. And the US position with regards to Taiwan may be they might seek closer relations with Taiwan through economic policy and defence assistance.
We were speaking with Richard Bronosky just a little earlier, more around the election results in Italy, but he did mention that for someone to pick up the phone to a Taiwanese leader, you know, why not? You know, he can sort of do what he wants, and why not sort of, in a sense, break that protocol? Is this one of the aspects of Donald Trump that might be quite surprising, that he's willing to sort of cut through the official way of communicating to people and in fact might achieve or at least have some results that differ from previous administrations quite greatly?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he is going to be a very different president to previous ones, and he's a businessman first and a president second, and that can be both good and bad. It's good in the sense that, as you say, he can do things that maybe politicians, career politicians, couldn't do. But bad in the sense that he probably needs to get used to being a president and leading as a president rather than being a businessman, because international relations and dealing with China is not all about business negotiation. It's very different in the international sphere. So there's a steep learning curve for him to get used to that. but at the same time, his business skills and his negotiation acumen can actually allow him to do moves in the policy area that maybe Hillary Clinton couldn't have done.
Dr. Davis, in terms of the South China Sea and a much stronger stance on that, not going to be bullied around that space as Donald Trump, what then does that mean for the Australian government? Tend to tread much more diplomatically around this space. If the US does take a much firmer stance, will Australia be expected to come alongside that?
I think so, in the sense that one of the things you may see with the Trump administration fairly early on is a call for Australia to do more in the South China Sea, and that may take the form of an Australian or a joint Australian-US freedom of navigation operation, or a FONOP as they're called. And that involves sending a naval vessel or an aircraft within the 12 nautical mile limit of disputed territories, not because we dispute their claim to those territories, but because we dispute China's interpretation of the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea in regards to economic exclusion zones. They have a very different interpretation on EEZs, in that they refuse to accept the right of naval vessels to transit EEZs without gaining permission first, and they're the only state that makes this claim. Everyone else in the international community accepts the right of naval vessels to transit EEZs. So I think it's quite justified for the Americans to ask us to do a FONOP, because we supposedly support international law and we support the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. So if we actually support it, we should put our money where our mouth is and actually do FONOPs with the Americans.
Dr. Malcolm Davis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute joining me from Canberra. Thank you so much.
Thank you.